At minus 40 degrees Celsius, your breath becomes a death sentence. Every exhale creates a vapor cloud that reveals your position to the enemy. But Simo Häyhä discovered something that turned the deadliest cold in history into his greatest weapon. Act 1. The Killing Cold December 1939. The Kola River, Finland. The thermometer read minus 43 degrees Celsius. That's minus 45 Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in under 2 minutes. Cold enough to make metal so brittle it shatters. Cold enough to kill a human being in less than 30 minutes without proper protection. This was the coldest winter Finland had seen in 50 years, and it was about to become a weapon. The Soviet invasion force consisted of 750,000 soldiers. They came from all over the Soviet Union, Ukraine, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Russia. Most of them had never experienced cold like this. Their standard-issue uniforms were designed for temperatures down to minus 20 Celsius, not minus 40. Within the first week, Soviet commanders reported something shocking. More soldiers were dying from cold than from Finnish bullets. Frostbite turned fingers black within minutes. Soldiers couldn't operate their weapons because their hands were frozen. Equipment malfunctioned. Tank engines wouldn't start. Aircraft fuel froze in the lines. Men huddled together for warmth, making perfect targets. The cold was killing them, but for Simo Häyhä, the cold was home. Because Simo understood something the Soviet army didn't. In Finland, winter isn't your enemy. It's your ally, if you know how to use it. Simo had grown up in these forests. He had hunted in temperatures this cold since he was a child. He knew that minus 40 wasn't just a number. It was an entire ecosystem of survival that most people would never understand. He knew that at minus 40, sound travels differently, farther, clearer. A rifle shot can be heard from 3 times the normal distance. He knew that at minus 40, metal becomes so cold it will stick to your skin instantly, tearing flesh if you touch it with bare hands. He knew that at minus 40, your body loses heat 20 times faster than normal. Every movement generates warmth that you can't afford to lose. But most importantly, he knew how to make the cold work for him instead of against him. And that knowledge would make him invisible. Act 2. The Invisible Breath. The first Soviet counter-sniper team arrived on December 8, 1939. 5 elite marksmen, specially trained in winter warfare. They had been briefed about the White Death, the Finnish sniper who had already killed 47 Soviet soldiers in just 8 days. Their mission was simple: find him and eliminate him. They entered Simo's sector at dawn, when the temperature was at its coldest, minus 41 degrees. They were confident. They had the best equipment, the best training, the best cold weather gear the Soviet Union could provide. But they made one critical mistake. They breathed normally. At minus 40 degrees, every breath you exhale creates a massive vapor cloud. In the still morning air, that cloud hangs in front of your face for several seconds. It's like sending up a signal flare. I'm here. Shoot me. The Soviet snipers spread out across the forest, searching for Simo. Each man breathing carefully, slowly, trying to minimize the vapor. But it was still visible. 5 white clouds floating between the trees. Simo watched them from 250 meters away. He wasn't breathing vapor, because Simo had discovered a technique that sounds insane but actually works perfectly. He had snow in his mouth, not a little bit. A full mouthful of packed snow held between his cheek and gum. When he exhaled, his warm breath hit the snow first. The snow absorbed the heat and moisture. By the time the air left his mouth, it was cold enough that it created no visible vapor. The Soviet snipers couldn't see him because he wasn't creating the one thing that gives away every sniper's position in extreme cold: breath vapor. But the technique came at a cost. Holding snow in your mouth at minus 40 degrees is agonizing. Your teeth ache. Your gums go numb. Your tongue feels like it's freezing solid. The cold radiates through your jaw into your skull, creating a headache that never stops. Most people couldn't endure it for 5 minutes. Simo did it for 16 hours straight. He watched the Soviet counter-sniper team search for him. Watched them move closer. Watch their breath clouds give away their exact positions. Then, methodically, one by one, he eliminated them. First shot, the team leader. Dropped at 11:23 a.m. The other four immediately went prone, trying to find cover. But Simo had already identified all 5 positions from their breath vapor. Second shot, the sniper on the left flank. Down at 11:26 a.m., the remaining 3 didn't move. They knew movement meant death. They stayed perfectly still, hoping invisibility would save them. But at -40 degrees, staying still is also death. Because the cold doesn't care if you're moving or not. It just keeps taking your body heat. And eventually you have to move or you'll freeze. Third shot, 12:14 p.m. The sniper who shifted position because his legs were going numb. Fourth shot, 1:37 p.m. The sniper who tried to crawl backward to safety. The 5th sniper lasted until 3:52 p.m., nearly 5 hours lying in -41 degree snow, not moving, barely breathing, slowly freezing to death. When he finally tried to retreat, Simo was still there. Still waiting. Still invisible. 5th shot. Mission complete. When Finnish soldiers checked the area the next day, they found all 5 Soviet snipers exactly where Simo said they would be. All dead. All killed by single shots to the upper torso or head, and they found something else. Simo's position from the day before. There was a small depression in the snow where he had lain for 16 hours. The snow around it was stained with blood from his gums. Where holding the snow had caused tissue damage, the cost of invisibility. Act 3, the Ice Shield, December 15th. 1939, Soviet command was getting desperate. Every counter-sniper team they sent was being eliminated. Artillery strikes weren't working. Simo would simply move to a new position. Aircraft couldn't spot him through the forest canopy. They needed a new strategy. So they tried something different. Night operations. At night, the temperature dropped even further. -45, sometimes -47 degrees. Most Finnish soldiers retreated to bunkers and shelters. It was simply too cold to operate effectively. But Soviet commanders reasoned, if the White Death can't see us in the dark, we can advance without casualties. They were wrong. Because Simo had turned darkness and extreme cold into another tactical advantage. The problem with night operations at -45 is simple. You need light to see. And light in extreme cold creates specific, predictable patterns. When Soviet soldiers used flashlights, the beams created visible clouds in the cold air, like shining a light through fog. When they lit fires for warmth, the heat created massive thermal signatures visible from hundreds of meters away. When they moved, their body heat left temporary trails in the snow that Simo could track even in darkness. But Simo's most brilliant, cold weather tactic was something no military manual had ever documented. The ice shield. Here's how it worked. Before taking a shooting position, Simo would pour water on the snow directly in front of where his rifle barrel would be. In -45 degree cold, the water would freeze in less than 30 seconds, creating a thin sheet of ice. Why? Because when you fire a rifle, especially in extreme cold, the muzzle blast kicks up snow. Even a small amount of displaced snow is visible. It creates a tiny white cloud that reveals your position. But if the snow is frozen into ice, it doesn't move. The muzzle blast hits the ice, not loose snow. No disturbance. No visible signature. Additionally, the ice created a smooth, stable surface for the rifle barrel, preventing the weapon from sinking into snow between shots. It was genius level, tactical thinking born from understanding cold. Physics Soviet soldiers never figured out why they couldn't locate the Finnish sniper even after he fired. They would see the muzzle flash, but by the time they aimed at that position, there would be no snow disturbance, no evidence anyone was there. It was like fighting a ghost. But the ice shield was just one part of a complete, cold weather system Simo had perfected. His white camouflage wasn't just white, it was textured with actual snow and ice crystals that matched the surrounding environment exactly. He would spray water on his uniform and roll in snow, letting it freeze into place. The result? He didn't just look like snow, he looked like the exact type of snow in that specific location. His rifle was wrapped in white cloth strips that he would wet and freeze, creating an icy coating that eliminated any metal shine or contrast. He positioned himself so that the sun, when it was visible during the short winter days, was always behind him, creating a natural glare that made it nearly impossible for enemies to look in his direction. He used the extreme cold to his advantage in close calls. Once, when Soviet soldiers came within 50 meters of his position, he simply stopped moving and let the cold work for him. His white uniform, covered in actual ice and snow, made him indistinguishable from the landscape. The soldiers walked right past him, scanning for threats, never seeing the threat lying 3 meters away. After they passed, he eliminated 4 of them from behind before they even realized what was happening. Art 4. The Cold That Kills Machines, January 1940. The Soviet Union deployed something they thought would finally end the White Death: armored vehicles with mounted searchlights. The theory was sound. Searchlights would illuminate the entire forest. The White Death couldn't hide if every shadow was eliminated. Armored vehicles would protect the operators from sniper fire. They tested the system on January 12, 1940. Temperature, -46 degrees Celsius. 3 armored vehicles, each with massive searchlights, slowly advanced through Simo's sector. The searchlights swept across the snow, creating an artificial daylight environment. Soviet infantry followed behind the vehicles, confident they were protected. Simo watched from 400 meters away. He didn't shoot at the soldiers. He didn't shoot at the vehicles. He waited. Because at -46 degrees, machines die faster than men. The first vehicle's engine began misfiring after 20 minutes. The extreme cold had caused the fuel to become viscous, almost gel-like. The engine couldn't pump it efficiently. The second vehicle's tracks froze. Ice had formed between the track links and the drive wheels. The vehicle could move forward but couldn't turn. The third vehicle's searchlight shattered. The extreme cold had made the glass so brittle that the internal heat from the bulb created stress fractures. The light exploded, sending glass fragments across the snow. Simo still hadn't fired a shot. Within 40 minutes, all 3 vehicles were disabled. Not from enemy fire. From the cold, the Soviet infantry, now without their protective vehicles, tried to retreat. But they had advanced too far into the forest. They were 2 kilometers from their main line, in -46-degree cold, without vehicles for transport. That's when Simo started shooting. He didn't try to kill all of them. That would have been impossible. There were at least 30 soldiers. Instead, he targeted the ones who seemed to be leaders. The ones other soldiers were following. First shot, an officer giving orders. Down. Second shot, a soldier who was trying to organize a defensive position. Down. Third shot, another officer trying to call for backup on a radio. Down. The rest of the Soviet soldiers panicked. They ran in different directions, trying to escape the invisible killer. But running in -46-degree cold is death. You generate sweat. The sweat freezes. You lose body heat catastrophically fast. Within 2 hours, 12 Soviet soldiers had died from sniper fire. Another 8 died from cold exposure trying to escape. The remaining 10 made it back to Soviet lines with severe frostbite. The mission was a complete failure. But the most important part? Soviet command learned that technology couldn't defeat the White Death. The cold was his ally, and it would destroy any machine they sent against him. Act 5. The Frozen Fortress, February 1940. By now, Simo had adapted so completely to the extreme cold that his body had undergone physiological changes. Finnish military doctors examined him during a brief rotation off the front line. What they found was remarkable. His resting heart rate had dropped to 42 beats per minute, elite athlete level, because his body had adapted to conserve heat and energy. His metabolism had increased by approximately 30% to generate more body heat. His extremities, fingers, toes, nose, had developed better circulation to prevent frostbite despite constant exposure to -40+ degree temperatures. He could maintain fine motor control in his trigger finger at temperatures that would leave most people unable to feel their hands. But the most important adaptation was mental. Simo had learned to think in cold. Here's what that means. Most soldiers fighting in extreme cold are constantly thinking about warmth, about shelter, about fires, about anything other than the cold. Their minds are divided between the mission and survival. Simo's mind wasn't divided. He had accepted the cold as a permanent state. He didn't fight it. He didn't resist it. He integrated it into every decision. When choosing a shooting position, he didn't think, where can I hide? He thought, where does the cold create the best camouflage? When planning movement, he didn't think, how can I move quickly? He thought, how can I move while losing the least body heat? When engaging targets, he didn't think, how many can I kill? He thought, which kills will cause maximum psychological damage while conserving my energy for the cold? This mental adaptation made him more dangerous than any weapon. It also allowed him to do something that seemed impossible: build a frozen fortress. In early February, Simo established a primary position on a ridge overlooking a key Soviet supply route. But instead of just lying in the snow, he spent 3 full nights building something unprecedented. He excavated snow to create a depression approximately 1 meter deep. Then, using water from a nearby stream, he built walls around the depression. Not snow walls, ice walls. He would pour water, let it freeze in layers, building up walls that were 30 centimeters thick. The result was a sniper position that was invisible from a distance, looked like a natural snow formation. Bulletproof, 30 centimeters of ice can stop rifle rounds. Insulated, the walls blocked wind, creating a microclimate inside. Permanent, the position lasted for weeks. From this frozen fortress, Simo operated with terrifying efficiency. He had a clear view of the Soviet supply route. He had protection from return fire. He had escape routes built into the structure. Over 17 days, he killed 63 Soviet soldiers from that single position. Soviet forces eventually discovered the position, but only after Simo had abandoned it. When they examined the frozen fortress, military engineers were stunned. One Soviet report, declassified in 1997, stated, "The Finnish sniper has demonstrated tactical innovation that exceeds anything in our training manuals." The use of ice as both camouflage and fortification shows adaptive thinking at the highest level. Recommend all Soviet snipers be trained in similar techniques. They were trying to learn from the man they were trying to kill. 6. The science of survival. Here's what modern scientists discovered when they analyzed Simo's cold weather tactics decades later. The snow-in-mouth technique. Not just brilliant, scientifically perfect. The snow absorbs moisture and heat, preventing vapor. But Simo had also figured out the right amount. Too little snow, you still create vapor. Too much snow, your mouth becomes too cold to function. He used approximately 15-20 grams, exactly the amount researchers now say is optimal. The ice shield. Physics professors at Helsinki University tested this in 2004. They found that frozen water in front of a rifle muzzle reduces visible disturbance by 94% compared to loose snow. Simo had accidentally discovered advanced physics through trial and error. The textured camouflage. Military camouflage experts now recognize that Simo was 50 years ahead of his time. Modern ghillie suits use the exact same principle. Match not just color, but texture and light reflection of the environment. Position selection based on cold. Thermal imaging studies showed that Simo's preferred positions were always in locations where cold air naturally pooled, lowering his thermal signature even further and making him nearly invisible to any heat detection technology had it existed then. But there's one technique Simo used that scientists still can't fully explain. Finnish soldiers who fought alongside Simo reported something strange. He seemed to know when Soviet soldiers were suffering from hypothermia, even from hundreds of meters away. He would sometimes hold fire on a group of Soviet soldiers, watching them for minutes, then suddenly shoot one specific soldier. Later, when Finnish troops examined the bodies, the soldier Simo had shot first was always the one in the best physical condition. the one who posed the greatest threat. The others, Simo had recognized, were already dying from cold. He let the cold kill them, conserving his ammunition for real threats. How did he identify hypothermia victims from 300+ meters away? Researchers believe he was watching for micro-movements. Hypothermic soldiers move differently, slower, more rigid, less coordinated. Their body language changes in subtle ways. Simo had spent so many hours in the cold, observing people in extreme temperatures, that he could diagnose hypothermia visually. It's a skill that even modern military snipers with thermal imaging can't replicate. ICT-7, the final lesson, March 6, 1940, the day Simo was shot. Temperature, -38°C. Later, when military historians analyzed that day, they discovered something important. The Soviet counter-sniper who finally hit Simo had been using advanced cold-weather tactics. He had positioned himself in a location where cold air pooled, reducing his thermal signature. He had used white camouflage with textured snow frozen onto it. He had been patient, waiting for hours without moving. The Soviets had learned. They had adapted Simo's own tactics against him, and it almost worked. Simo survived the shot, but his cold-weather career was over. The facial injury made it impossible for him to maintain the snow-and-mouth technique. His reconstructed jaw couldn't handle the extreme cold the same way, but his legacy lived on. Because what Simo proved wasn't just about survival, it was about adaptation. After the Winter War, militaries around the world began studying his techniques. The Soviet Union created special cold-weather sniper training programs based on captured Finnish reports. About the White Death, the United States developed cold-weather warfare tactics during World War II that directly incorporated Simo's innovations. Modern sniper training in cold environments still teaches the principles Simo discovered. Use the environment as camouflage, turn environmental challenges into tactical advantages. Adapt physically and mentally to extreme conditions. Think like the cold, not against it. In 1998, when Simo was interviewed about his cold weather tactics, the interviewer asked, "How did you learn all these techniques? Did the military train you?" Simo's answer, "The cold trained me. I just listened." ACT-8, the cold truth. Here's what most people don't understand about Simo Häyhä's cold weather mastery. It wasn't just about tactics. It was about relationship. Most people see -40 degrees as an enemy, something to fight, something to overcome, something to defeat. Simo saw it as a partner. He understood that the cold wasn't trying to kill him. It was just existing. It killed Soviet soldiers because they treated it as an enemy. They resisted it, fought it, tried to conquer it. Simo accepted it, worked with it, became part of it. There's a Finnish word that describes this, sisu. It doesn't translate perfectly to English. It's not quite determination, not quite resilience, not quite courage. It's more like the strength to continue when you've passed the point where continuation seems impossible. But in Simo's case, sisu wasn't about fighting against impossible odds. It was about finding possibility within the impossible. At -40 degrees, most soldiers saw only death. Simo saw opportunity. When Soviet soldiers huddled together for warmth, he saw targets grouped conveniently. When Soviet equipment froze, he saw disabled threats. When Soviet commanders sent soldiers in daylight to avoid the extreme cold of night, he saw predictable patterns. The cold wasn't his enemy. It was his strategic advantage. Modern military psychologists have studied Simo's mindset extensively. They've concluded that his mental adaptation to extreme cold represents one of the purest examples of environmental integration in combat history. He didn't just survive in the cold. He became part of it, and that made him unstoppable. Final revelation today. Climate scientists studying historical weather data have confirmed something remarkable. The winter of 1939-1940 was the coldest in Finnish recorded history. Average temperatures were 8 to 12 degrees colder than normal. Some days reached -49 degrees Celsius. By pure statistics, the winter war should have been unwinnable for Finland. The cold alone should have incapacitated the Finnish army just as much as the Soviets. But it didn't, because the Finns understood something fundamental. You can't fight winter. You can only work with it. Simo Häyhä didn't just demonstrate this principle. He perfected it. His 505 confirmed kills weren't just about marksmanship. They were about understanding that in extreme conditions, the environment itself becomes a weapon, and the soldier who masters the environment becomes invisible. In 2021, a group of modern Special Forces snipers attempted to replicate Simo's cold weather tactics in Alaska. They had all his techniques. They had better equipment. They had detailed notes on his methods. They lasted 3 days before calling off the exercise. When asked why, the team leader said, "We can copy his techniques, but we can't copy his mindset. He lived in that cold. We were just visiting." There's a difference. That difference made Simo Häyhä the most feared sniper in history, not because of his rifle, not because of his marksmanship, but because he understood something no military academy can teach. In extreme cold, the invisible man isn't the one who hides, it's the one who becomes the cold itself. Want to know what happened when Simo was finally shot? The survival story that defied medical science. Watch now.